Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. No Face, and today we'll be talking about an interesting topic around oral drug delivery systems. So like I said, we'll be talking about oral drug delivery systems. So if that is something that interests you, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel to help us grow this channel. So what is an oral drug delivery system? I'm quite sure each and every one of you listening to this channel would have had your tablets, your capsules, your encapsulated pellets, your solutions and suspensions, and these are all oral drug delivery systems. So what makes them oral drug delivery systems is because of the route of administration, because we have to administer via the mouth into the GIT, and absorption will occur there. So obviously there are different mechanisms of absorption which we will discuss subsequently, but today we'll just concentrate on oral drug delivery system and discuss some details about it. So let's talk about a case. For example, if you were to, for example, have an accident and you manage to get to the hospital and you've been giving your first aid treatment and you manage to end up with a bandage all over your hands. So probably at some point, and the pain started coming back again, and you decided to visit the hospital again. So you found your way to the hospital, and there you met up with your doctor. So the doctor will normally assist you with whatever you're looking for in the hospital, and he will probably take you into the hospital and assess your state, obviously with the help of other health professionals in place. The doctor will probably have a look at your hands. So if, for example, you have a POP over the hands, that will determine the type of dosage form the doctor will be using on that hand. So probably the doctor will try to establish that the pain is only in that area. So the pain is only around the hands here. And if he's able to obtain that information from you, he will decide the type of dosage form to give to you to tackle that pain. That might be in the form of a tablet, for example, or most likely not a cream or an ointment, because now we have a barrier to the site of pain because of the POP you have on there. Another way the doctor might approach this might be to give you an injection, but that depends on the severity of the pain or how much severity of the pain and how quickly the doctor wants to end the pain for the patient. In that case, the pain around your hand. But I'm quite sure if you get into the hospital, and even if there is need to administer that particular injection to stop the pain immediately, because whenever you have an injection, you have 100% bioavailability of the drug. Again, all these terms that I'm talking about in this video, subsequently I will provide more details for you to be able to understand it when I'm discussing these areas. So, but it's highly likely that even if you are given an injection, that the doctor will probably follow it up with tablets or capsules, as the case may be. So it's highly likely you'll be given one of these medication here, for example, if we assume that is a painkiller, just like a diclofenac or ibuprofen, so you end up having something like this. So now what are we looking at? We're looking at probably a capsule. So this is a capsule, and this is your regular tablet on there, and this is also a tablet, probably a very small tablet we have here. Okay, so tablets can come in different sizes and shapes. For capsules here, capsules are usually gelatin shells, which we load with our powders and use that to administer the drug. Now, it has some advantages of doing that, because if you have a powder in a shell, in your gelatin shell, as soon as it hits the mouth and into the GIT, the capsules dissolve and release the granules in there. But for your tablets, you have to go through what is called disintegration before you start talking about dissolution. So in the real sense, if you have a formulation as a tablet and have the same formulation as a capsule, it is highly likely that the capsules will have a faster onset of action, assuming every other condition stay the same. Why am I saying assuming every other thing stay the same? Because the GIT is a very, very complex system, and that is what we'll be discussing in our next lectures. Okay, let's carry on. It is also important to bring to your notice that these oral dosage forms, which we've talked about, so whenever you hear oral dosage forms, they are to be administered via the GIT, via the mouth, most likely. It's quite important for you to understand that this makes up for 65% of small molecules. So when we're talking about small molecules, we are referring to your paracetamols, your ibuprofen. So the active ingredient itself are usually small molecules because of the size of molecule. But now if you're talking about large molecules, then you're referring to peptides and proteins. These are called large molecules. So 68 and 65% of small molecules are administered as oral dosage form, and 90% of the global share of all pharmaceutical formulations are also oral dosage forms, and that is quite a huge percentage. And you start to it makes you to start thinking, why is this the case? Why is oral dosage form so important that it takes up so much share of the pharmaceutical formulations globally? And that is because of some of the advantages that comes with administering drugs orally. And these are some of the things we'll be talking about here as well. So what are these advantages? So we have high compliance, and compliance is where it is, let's say, highly likely, or there is a higher chance of using the medication, especially when you're not there to supervise the administration of the medication on a client. And there are a lot of factors that affect compliance. So you talk about ease of use. You can just peel a medication and put in the mouth and swallow, and that's all you really need to do, just like you swallow food and every other thing. So it makes it very easy for patients to use it, which is why you have this high compliance. So let's compare it to injections, for example. I'm quite sure you listening on over the internet will not like the pains associated with having an injection. So again, a patient is more likely to comply to using tablets than using injections, unless you are exceptional that you don't feel any pain. Obviously, in some situations, then injections will be favorable, which is one of the downsides of oral administration. And another advantage of oral medication is the safety that it offers. Again, the safety is around the fact that you have to administer it via the GIT. So the body itself has a very good defense mechanism. And again, if we compare it directly to injections, we have to inject directly into the vein, so directly into the systemic circulation. And really, there is no room for errors in this situation, because if there is any error, it is very hard to reverse. But for example, if you had some drugs orally and it managed to be an error, there are some antidotes you can take to slow down the absorption of the medication, which is why it is safe. And again, you think about the first pass effect as well, which destroys a lot of the drugs as well. First pass effect, which will also, first pass effect is when you have the drug being metabolized by the liver first before it gets into the systemic circulation. So this is called first pass effect, and it occurs in most all orally administered medication. So it is easy to administer, just like I said earlier. It's quite easy to administer, again, which could be linked to the compliance as well. Okay, so there is no need for a professional support. You don't need a nurse to assist you in swallowing the medication, unlike injections that will normally be done by a doctor or a nurse. So you require no professional support to do this. And most of the time when you get to the hospital, you'll be given these medication, given instructions on how to use them, and you will go home and carry on using them. Can also be used to target different areas of the GIT. So for the GIT, we have the stomach, we have the obviously the stomach. Then you have the small intestines. Then you also have the large intestines. Okay, forgive my drawing. So some medications can be used to, for example, they are called enteric coated medications. So you can avoid the drug releasing in the stomach here, and use a polymer to modify the area of release. For example, in the intestine here, you can have the drug to release in that area specifically. So you can actually modify the site of drug release, which is quite useful, especially when you are dealing with drugs that are degraded in stomach due to the acidity of the stomach, or you are dealing with drugs that might also affect the stomach lining as well. So something like let's say ibuprofen, you would normally have an instruction to have it with food. Again, that is to provide a layer of coating around the stomach to prevent the impact of that particular drug on the GIT. So you can also use it to target the colon as well. It's very useful for colorectal cancer, where you are targeting specifically that cancer, that site where you have the cancer in the colon. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you can use oral medication for everything. So we will also discuss some of the disadvantages of using oral medications. So just like I mentioned earlier, now I was discussing the formulation aspect of oral medication. So it tends to be complex sometimes. For example, if you're manufacturing a tablet, you have to think about your granulation step. Again, don't worry about it if you don't understand what I'm talking about now. I'm quite sure as we carry on with these teachings or videos, eventually you start understanding some of these terms that I'm using. So you start thinking about the granulation step, the drying, and every other thing that is involved in the manufacturing of a tablet, the compaction. You have to think about the formulation itself. Does it have to disintegrate fast enough to meet up with the standards of, for example, the British pharmacopoeia or the US pharmacopoeia, depending on the area that you live in. So there are some degree of formulation difficulties there. So you also think about unpredictable drug release. Just like I mentioned earlier, the GIT tends to be very complex, tends to have a lot of variations in transit time, variations in the pH around the GIT, and all this could have a negative effect on the drug release. So you cannot really predict drug release. Theoretically you can, but because of these variation between one person to the other, it makes it really difficult sometimes. If you compare this again to injections, if you were to administer 5 milligrams into the vein, then you get 5 milligrams. But that might not be the case if you're talking about oral medications, because you start thinking about the first pass effect, which is the degradation by the liver. You start thinking about, what if I ate too much? That will usually slow down what is called gastric emptying, which is where the stomach has processed the food and drop it into the small intestinal area, which will then affect transit time. And you can also think about a situation where, if, for example, you're having diarrhea or something and you had a drug that will normally flush out the drug through the feces and wouldn't give it much time to be absorbed. So it's really unpredictable. So not applicable in dysphagia. Dysphagia is a situation where there is swallowing difficulties. So this will normally happen in elderly patients. So if the patient can't swallow, how do you administer an orally administered medication? That brings in the need for you to look for alternative routes in this case. So again, not applicable when vomiting. So if you have a patient that is vomiting all the time, obviously oral medications wouldn't be the option there, because after administration there is a very high chance that the patient will vomit the medication, and therefore the therapeutic activity required from the drug won't be achieved. So again, these are some of the major limitations there. Again, you cannot use that for emergency. So it's very important for you to understand how oral medications work and the time it might take for an onset of action. So onset of action is the time it took for you to obtain this therapeutic activity, the time for the blood plasma concentration of the drug to get to the minimum effective concentration. So again, depending on how much food that has been had by the patient, this could take between 30 minutes to probably 2 hours. So again, this will make this medication not suitable for emergencies. Again, one of its major limitations. So again, I've talked about exposure to first pass effect. First pass effect again being most drugs have to go through the liver before they get into the blood, and during this process or the traveling through the liver, some of the medications are metabolized and removed from the system. And if that happens, if you don't have that into the calculation of the final dosage of the oral medication, then in some situations you wouldn't achieve the activity expected from the drug. Again, this is why you have shelf lives on most medications, because probably they start degrading. Then if they have degraded to half of the usual concentration, for example, and you administer orally, that means after the first pass effect, you will have a sub-therapeutic dose in the drug and most likely wouldn't achieve the therapeutic activity in that case. So needless to say that it is quite very, very important for you to understand how the GIT works. So in our next lecture or our next video, I will be breaking down how the GIT works and how this can be linked to our dosage forms and the things you have to understand, from the pH variations to the transit time, and how these factors will affect the behavior of your drug. And also something called LADME, which is liberation, absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So this really plays a very key role in the pharmacokinetics of the drug. So I hope you've managed to understand one or two things in this lecture. Please give us a subscribe and like this video if you managed to learn something from the content today. And again, thanks for your time, and I will see you again on the next one. See you. Dr. No Face signing out. Bye.